The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian and nobody else for Breaking Down Security this week. Mr. Betcher, Miss Berlin got called away to meetings, unfortunately. And, as we always say here, company comes first, and then, it's the podcast and, family and all that, and then the podcast. So we're like a distant third to everybody. So it's just going to be me this week from the Breaking Down Security group. We have an interview this week with two people. We don't normally get a lot of two people interviews, which is great. That means double the fun. We have Kim. I've watched Good Omens, so is it Crawley or
Crawley? You got it right the first time.
Yay! Okay, Kim Crawley and Phillip Wylie from Wylie Books. He owns Wylie Books. It's amazing. No, not Wylie Books. Oh, okay. Phillip, thank you for coming as well.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Right on. All right, so Kim, I'll start with you. Maybe you could tell people a little bit about yourself. Everybody has an origin story, superheroes or no, and then we'll get Phil with his origin story, and we'll get started on why we're here today.
I think my upbringing was perfect for the career I ended up having. My dad was a professional writer, but writing completely different stuff, novels mainly. And that gave me two advantages. One, it introduced computer technology into the household early. So we were on the internet by 1993, which was earlier than most households. And also my dad showed me how to write for commercial purposes. So those two facets, I think, were a big advantage to me ending up where I am now. I was always fascinated with computers when I was a kid. Maybe computer technology didn't enter my life as early as it would have if I was Gen Z. Mm-hmm. But it entered my life fairly early. I remember my half-brother's Commodore 64 back in the late 80s. And I was only a little kid back then. I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, but I was desperate to touch it as much as I possibly could. I started to be able to fix problems with my dad's Windows 3.1 machine, which was a 486, like his printer issues or editing auto exec bat and stuff like that. But it's amazing because the idea of having a career related to computers didn't really occur to me until I was well into my 20s. And I think that's partially from the discouragement I got in school. And I started taking, in my mid-20s, I started preparing for certain IT certifications because people eventually pushed me in that direction, seeing some potential there. And I had like several CompTIA certs eventually, like A+, Security Plus, Network Plus, that sort of thing. And so with those creds, I got work as a desktop support technician. This was like well over a decade ago. And that is a hard freaking job, being tech support. But at the same time, I also did a lot of writing on the internet. And I started doing stuff like video game reviews and stuff like that. Eventually, the two things converged, and I started writing about cybersecurity. Nice. And about 5 or 6 years into doing that, I got into a position where I could actually make a living, like doing that as a day job.
Okay.
And I learned so much about computer technology and security, if not every day, definitely every week. And I love what I do. And I think I'm doing what I'm destined to be doing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Phillip, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, how I got started into technology is I started out as a sysadmin. So I worked 6.5 years as a sysadmin. I started out supporting Novell NetWare back in '97. Novell NetWare was the popular network operating system before Microsoft came out with directory services. So it's the popular one at the time. So I started there. I spent like 6.5 years as a sysadmin. Then in 2004, I moved into security, did network security for about 1.5 years, then moved into AppSec. The company hired a CISO, and he came in and modernized our security department. Prior to that, everyone was doing network security, firewalls, IDS, risk evaluations, risk assessments, and like vulnerability scans. And so that was it. So when he came in, I got put in the application security group. I was doing web application vulnerability scans, and that's where I got interested in penetration testing. And then in 2012, I got laid off and I went to work consulting as a penetration tester, consulted for about 5 years, and then moved into the corporate world, got out of consulting and worked for a US bank doing pen testing there, and then was red team lead for Kimberly-Clark. My latest job is lead curriculum developer for Point 3 security. So on top of my day job, I also teach at a community college. I teach ethical hacking and web app pen testing. And so that's really where the idea for the book came about. My first lecture of the class each semester was about pen testing. And so that lecture evolved into a conference talk and then evolved into a book. I was in the Private Hackers Red Team edition, and Wylie Publishing reached out to me and asked if I was interested in writing a book. So I thought it'd be a good idea to write a book on the subject, since it's about getting started as a penetration tester. There's so many books about penetration testing, but no one tells you what you need to know before, starting down that journey.
Okay. Well, that brings us actually very, very conveniently to our first question. Why did you write the book? Obviously, it sounds like this was kind of a roadmap to becoming a pen tester. To be fair and to be completely transparent, I only got access to the book a couple hours ago, and I've been reading through it, and I actually find that what a pen tester is excellent. The one thing I didn't see, and maybe that was the something I want to ask is, did you go into asking the question about why somebody wants to be a pen tester? Maybe they have a hacker mindset. I mean, what is a hacker mindset? That's bandied about all over the place. Not just in your book, but on the internet, and if you're new to the industry, there's a hacker mindset. What is a hacker mindset for people who don't understand what that might be?
Yes, being able to think like a hacker, or not necessarily, because the original term of hacker was people that tinkered with stuff, built stuff, and figured out how things worked and enhanced capabilities. But in this fact, it's more in line with the computer hacking. So building that mindset is similar to like troubleshooting. So when you build like a computer for the first time, install an operating system, if everything goes perfect, you learn some, but you don't really learn much until things break. So the hacker mindset is learning how, if this exploit doesn't work, other exploits you can use, how to change those exploits to get it to work. Once you get like an initial foothold, what do you do next? So it's getting experience with hacking to learn, okay, I'm able to upload a malicious file to this system. I've got access to the command line. I got a shell. What do I do next? So seeing your level of access, do you have NT system authority, or do you have root? If you got that, then your life's easier. If you're not, then you got to elevate privileges. So just kind of learning how to put those things together, which is kind of similar, I would say, to like troubleshooting. Because if you build your server, you're not connecting, to make sure if you're using Wi-Fi that you've got a connection there. If not, you make sure your Ethernet cable's connected. Just kind of troubleshooting. So that's kind of the way I describe the hacker mindset.
Okay, Kim, how about you?
Well, the hacker mindset is really Phil's part of the book, but I think his view on it is ideal. I first really got into that kind of thinking and hacker culture about 10, 12 years ago when I read Stephen Levy's Hackers, which is about the history of hackers and hacker culture from like maybe the ENIAC era, like late 40s, mid 50s onward. And I learned all about like PDP mainframes throughout like the 60s and the timeshare systems they used to have to devise. And those were some of like the first hackers. There were people in universities, usually students, who would rent time through a time sharing application. So they got to use the PDP mainframes. Well, they're not mainframes, but really physically large computers.
Mm-hmm.
And they learned to program punch cards, because that's what the programming was done with, punch cards.
Right.
And all that history fascinates me, but that's really the start of hacker culture as far as I'm concerned. And that's directly related to the hacker mindset, wanting to see what technology can do. When someone buys a Raspberry Pi and an Arduino and they combine the two and they try to put together their own home electronic system, that is hacking. If someone sees a script that someone else wrote and they think if they tweak a few lines of code here and there, they can get the application to do something else useful, that is hacking.
Okay. So, Kim, you said you've, worked in varying backgrounds, and, you're doing some great work writing, news articles and all these items. One of the sections in the book is the skills needed for a pen tester. When you talk about the Pentester Blueprint, and Philip, we'll catch you after this. Other than, just having knowledge of security controls or IT admin, is there any other backgrounds that, lend itself to becoming a good pen tester, not just an IT admin or somebody who knows Linux?
That's an absolutely excellent question. One of the chapters later on in the book was a part that I wrote, and I wrote case studies. Like I invented, to illustrate an example, because I think analogies are very useful to people. I came up with 3 characters. I think it's chapter 7 or chapter 8. It's like doing a skills inventory.
Yep. Okay.
If you go like a few pages into that chapter, I invented 3 fictional characters. One worked at a supermarket, one worked as an HVAC technician, and one was a character largely based on myself, who liked writing and did some desktop support and whatnot. And I explain how, even though some of those jobs seem to have nothing to do with pen testing, like working in a supermarket, for instance, mm-hmm. you are acquiring some transferable skills into being a pen tester. Like the supermarket clerk needs to know when they're in the back room how to determine whether a truck that is delivering groceries is legitimate or it's someone trying to break into the supermarket to do a robbery. They have to deal with customers and be polite. And believe it or not, if you're working as a pen tester, you will be engaging in some customer service skills. You have to speak to the client and figure out what they need and fulfill their objectives. I think the vast majority of applications, many of which seem to have nothing to do with computers, have some transferable skills into pen testing.
Okay. Very cool. All right, Philip, how about you?
Yeah, I think kind of a roadmap or description of what skills are needed, and you can apply those to different areas, is knowing how to build something, knowing how to secure it is going to make it easier for a pen tester to assess that security and break into it. So, I mean, it was interesting. The very first pen test job I got, my manager actually never directed us to take pen testing courses or any kind of ethical hacking courses. He told us to build something, and that's a good way to do it. So if you've built Apache web server, then you're going to have an idea of the directory structure, how the security is applied. So knowing how to build is a major step in learning how to be a pen tester, because otherwise, if you try to, a lot of people want to jump right into pen testing, but I share with people, you can, if you want to start studying for pen testing, you're at least going to have to, in parallel, study those other technologies. You need to understand networking, operating systems, how web servers and stuff like that work. I mean, you can learn Windows, server at the same time you're learning how to hack it, but you can't get around learning the technology. And wherever you try to take shortcuts, if you're doing a pen testing, you got a shell to a system, and it's like Linux or Windows, and you don't know those operating systems, it's going to slow you down. You're going to have to be doing a lot of research and Googling while you're doing it, and that's not, very efficient.
I'm muting myself because unfortunately my cat has decided to try to come in and have a meeting with me today. So it's, good times. Good timing.
For your filling in for the missing people on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, she's a poor substitute. Don't tell her I said that. Anyway, so okay, that's great because one of the things that I have seen, in a lot of organizations, I've worked at a number of places is a lot of times, people write resumes and they submit them and they don't feel like that they're qualified for the job. And that could be either because of poor job descriptions or because the person doesn't know how to translate what they know into skills that map towards the job description. I'm more leaning towards the job description sucks because I've seen a lot of poor job descriptions, but that's neither here nor there. So, when you mentioned the Pentester Blueprint formula, I think we'll start with Philip this time. And what is the Pentester Blueprint formula, and how did you come up with something like that?
Just kind of a higher level overview of what it takes to become a pen tester. It's the technology knowledge, plus the security knowledge, plus the hacker mindset.
Okay.
Kind of a way to simplify it, but when you break it down, there's a little bit more to it. But there's kind of building blocks you can look at there. So if once you have the technology portion, once you got that down, then you've got to understand the security. So it's kind of just a high level way of explaining what it took to become a pen tester.
Right. Go ahead, Kim. Feel free to add whatever you'd like.
I don't have anything to add about that. That is the core of what this whole book is about. Like the book is based on Phil's Pentester Blueprint talks, which he still gives at security events on a regular basis.
Nice.
And so the main difference between the book and his talks is we expand a lot on the content of his talks. And we also fill in how pen testing fits into the grand picture as well.
Okay. All right. So would this book only work if you were trying to become a pen tester? Let's say I don't have any experience in security, but I'm the guy that always has to fix the grandparents' computer when they go over to their house because computers, which happened to me more often than not, even when I wasn't doing computers. If you're not going to become a pen tester, and let's say, you realize, well, whatever reason, it's too difficult or whatever, does this book work for, like, let's say you want to move into a compliance side, or you want to be a SOC person, or maybe you want to just, poke around and do something that isn't a pen tester role. So go ahead, Philip, and then we'll get Kim.
Sure. I think where it's helpful, and one of the kind of visions I had for this book too was hoping that it could help project managers and management that are dealing with pen testers that don't understand pen testing. Because even if you're not directly doing pen testing, if you're someone that manages projects, if you understand the pen testing process and what goes into it, I think that's very helpful. And kind of as mentioned in the talk and in the book, that this is helpful to SOC analysts, the pen testing topic, because if you understand malicious traffic, that's going to help as a SOC analyst. Even if you're doing network security, be able to understand malicious traffic. If you're a digital forensics incident response person, it's going to help you, investigating your cases too, if you understand the attacks. Because if you see certain types of files, maybe some malicious PowerShell files, then you may get an idea of, what all was entailed in that attack. Maybe it's part of some kind of APT that you can find on the MITRE attack framework, but just understanding that's going to help you investigate well. And kind of one of the things was too, is to offer some resources on, where to get learning resources to be a pen tester, because when you're starting out, there's a lot of resources out there and you don't know what's good. So if you have vetted resources, then that cuts your time out a lot. And I've experienced that a lot with people I've mentored, because when I was starting out in pen testing, I was discovering resources on my own. I really didn't have anyone that was sharing that information with me. So over the years before I started teaching and wrote the book, I was sharing those resources with other people. And so a lot of that alone, just to be able to know good learning resources is a big help. But I think it's good for, like I said, managers, anyone that's working with security. And one of the things, the great thing that Kim brought to this book, one of the great things, was the fact all of the security stuff she added to it, like the CIA triad. So it's a good primer on security to get some basics in there. And I think someone that reads this book, they may get a better idea of maybe some other areas in security they want to work in. Maybe after they read some of the content Kim wrote, they may decide they want to do something else besides pen testing.
Exactly, because my career and my studies of our field are completely generalized. I'm always thinking about how everything fits into everything else, how every role influences every other role, every function influences every other function. If you are conducting pen tests, you should understand how the blue teamers will take the vulnerability information that you compile and how they will apply it. I mention incident response in the book. If you're a red teamer, you will never be doing incident response in that role. But you should understand what the incident response team does, because everything affects everything else. I mean, that's why there are purple teams, red and blue together.
Right. Okay. Let me see. Education resources. So this is chapter 4 in the book, and you talk about training companies. Of course, SANS is in there. Mile 2, never heard of them, which I'll have to go check them out. I have heard of eLearn Security. Pentester Academy is great. Pentester Lab is great. Those are all great organizations. I do appreciate, we've had Georgia Weidman on way back in the day when her book came out, and I'd love to have her back on again. But this was a great book. I actually have that book. It's right over there in when I was trying to become a pen tester. That was the first book I bought, as a matter of fact, which is why I wanted to have her on the show. Sadly, I don't have the mentality to be a pen tester, so I just manage the folks who do. So it is what it is. Did you mention anything about communities in here? I know you've got SANS, they're kind of a community, but I did not see anything about joining communities, or Slack and Discords are numerous and plentiful these days. Are there any good Slacks or Discords communities that talk about security, or even IRC, I guess, is still a thing that you would suggest to people who are trying to break in and become pen testers? Kim, go ahead, please.
I keep getting invited to Slack groups and Discord groups, but every time someone invites me to one of those groups, I forget to keep logging on because it kind of overwhelms me. We do suggest, obviously, like specific institutions like SANS and whatnot. And I think the general idea of finding meetings in your local community, which isn't very, it's not something that's easy to do during our pandemic.
Sure.
But you can find these communities online. Definitely finding like-minded people. Finding hacker spaces, like Toronto has multiple hacker spaces, is very good. But there are so many different communities. They're pretty easy to find because we all have the internet these days.
Right.
But I don't know of any specific Slack or Discord groups because I'm just like totally jaded about keeping up with that stuff. No, definitely find a local hacker space. Find a local hack. Sometimes you can find people in like SANS related SANS related groups. I've mentioned, do people pronounce it OWASP?
Yes.
Or OWASP?
Yep.
If you want to get really into application related stuff, like web applications specifically, that's a great group. Basically, some of what we suggest in the book, you probably should have friends who are learning pen testing at the same time work with you. Like, for instance, in the pen testing lab chapter, we mention how it's easy to set up in your pen tester lab. It's easy to set up virtual machines on your local computer to simulate cyber attacks on, but it's not easy to simulate, to create a virtualized network. So there are services like Offensive Security has a service, but it's a paid service where they offer you a virtual network that you can pen test and simulate cyber attacks to your heart's content.
Yep.
But it might be expensive, and you really should maybe split the cost with a few other people in order to have access with that.
Sounds fair. Philip, how about you?
Yeah, chapter 9 of the book, we cover the section on getting employed as a pen tester. We can cover professional networking, like your local DEF CON groups, OWASP groups, as well as looking on Meetup, because one of the new popular Meetup groups, like in the Texas area, that was started out of Austin Hackers Association. There's been other hackers associations spring up throughout the country. Dallas has one that's pretty big. We've had people in the Dallas Hackers organization move off to New York and start groups. So it's another area, but yeah, definitely you want to network. This is one of the things that really, helped me at first with mentoring people, is I had a lot of people come to these different Meetup groups wanting to get into pen testing. And so that's what led me into teaching and then starting my own Meetup group. I have a Meetup group called the Pwn School Project, and it's mainly education focused. At first, it was all offensive security, but as we saw other people coming in that were just trying to get into security, we kind of changed it up to cover more than just offensive security. But yeah, we definitely, believe in networking. My last 4 full-time jobs have been from people I knew in the business, so I don't have to go through applying online and stuff. I just, I have people that make references and stuff. So that's a big part of the book, mentioning the networking. As far as Discords, there's a lot of great Discords out there. Black Hills Information Security Group, they've got one out there. They've got one for Wild West Hacking Fest. There's one out there for DEF CON that I believe is still up. Several of the different security groups. Trusted Sec has a Discord that's good.
Brakesec
You're
podcast.
much more up on the Discord and Slack scene than I am.
Yeah.
Brakesec podcast. That's like.
Plus, when speaking at conferences, everyone's using Discord these days. So I've signed up for a lot of Discord channels this year.
Yep. Yeah. One of the things that when we started doing the podcast, because one, we were selfish, as we like to say, we were just trying to get our own names out there to, get better jobs in information security as it was, and kind of became more than itself. So community building's kind of been our side project. So, we have a Slack as well. I think it's important to network before you need to network. I tell a story about getting laid off at a DoD contractor because the Navy just decided we don't need security anymore for this project. And I was like, oh, great. And so, I'm sitting here trying to figure out what to do next. And I found the ISSA group in Austin. And this was before AHA even. So like 2011, 2010, something like that. And, you go and you're like, oh, yeah, I want to be here in ISSA. Oh, yeah, by the way, I'm looking for a job. And you try to throw out your resume and it's like, it reeks of desperation, and which it was. I was desperate to try to find a new job. That's when I learned that you should be getting out there, even if you're painfully introverted like I was, to get out there, meet people so that you can create those those communities of folk. And one of the things that I did when we started the podcast was also the Slack. And, we do things like making sure there's a social contract. We have moderation. We have specific guidelines for people that way. And we're all noobs here is what we like to say. We're all noobs here. There's nobody who's an expert in anything. No thought leaders need apply. No rock stars need apply, that kind of stuff. So we have a ton of channels. We, get together. We talk about things. We have certain guidelines about, professional behavior. Those are, you should, if you're looking for a community, you should try to find those things. I do a virtual CISSP. I do I have a couple meetups now because I picked up the other one. I run a thing called CSEC and CSEC East in the Seattle area that does now virtual over Zoom talks every month. So first Wednesday of every month, we do speaking engagements. So maybe you, Kim, or you, Philip, can come and talk about something. We were doing just security stuff, but we moved over to DevOps, change management, project management, all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of things out there. Yeah, Meetup is definitely a place to look for those. A lot of conferences as well have mixers or networking breakout rooms where you can go and they'll do resume review. We actually do resume review in our Slack too, but there's a lot of good ways to network before you actually need to network, and you should not see that as just a necessary evil. It's something that could help you out in the long run, because it's not just, hey, I need a job. It's, hey, I've got this problem, or hey, I've seen this IOC, or I've seen this thing in my logs that looks odd. Has anybody else seen this? Oh yeah, that's China. You want to knock that down real quick. So the networking is also just information sharing, not just job-based ideas. So sorry, I went on a rant there. I want to go back to building a lab. We have a home lab channel in our Slack, and sometimes we get in some real deep discussions. What does it take to build a lab? And I know, Kim, you had mentioned earlier that you could just run VMware or VirtualBox on your machine, run something from Vulnhub to attack those. Maybe we could talk about the cost of building a lab that you can use to build up your skills.
A lot of the software, fortunately, is free and legally free. Like Kali is obviously, we all know that is a free operating system. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're building your lab, that's one of the first things that you want to do is you want to download a disk image of Kali Linux and burn it onto a DVD. And there are so many tools that are pre-installed in Kali, like literally hundreds and hundreds for everything from very specific network vulnerability tests and like Pentester Framework and whatnot, to like Wirecrack, like basically scripts for cracking Wi-Fi, scripts for doing all kinds of things. There is so much that you can be practicing as a budding pen tester just by reading through all the Kali documentation is massive. Reading through all of it and trying out as many of those tools that are pre-installed as you possibly can.
Right.
Of course, you do not want to be cyber attacking on people's real computers without their consent. So installing your own virtual machines, as you said, in VMware or VirtualBox is great. There is a website, like I think you mentioned Vulnhub, which has a massive collection of disk images of specifically vulnerable operating systems and applications. And you can launch those disk images in a virtualization client and go nuts in it. So yeah, I would say most of the software for your pen testing lab is free of charge.
That's cool. Philip, same question to you. What does it take, to build up a lab if on the cheap for you?
Yeah, just to kind of go back and reference Georgia's book. That's one of the good things about that book is she shows how to build your lab to be able to build out the lab that you use in the book. And I didn't really get around to mentioning when we were discussing Georgia, but that was the book I used for the first year I taught my classes before Pentest Plus came out. And then we changed over to the Pentest Plus book so students could get certifications to help, get a pen test job. That's a good resource to start there. But kind of like what was mentioned, in my home lab, I've got like the minimalist lab where I'm running VirtualBox. I've got VirtualBox and VMware that I've both used. I've kind of gotten where I like VMware more for anything that I've got to connect an external device to a VM. So if you're wanting to connect a USB, Wi-Fi adapter, it's a lot easier to use, VMware opposed to VirtualBox. But VirtualBox for everything else works well. So I've got what I refer to as the minimalist lab, which is my laptop with VMware and VirtualBox with some virtual images that are vulnerable, as well as Kali Linux and Parrot OS. And I've got also my dedicated system, a server that I built that I just put a bunch of vulnerable VMs on. It's running Ubuntu with VirtualBox, and I've got Metasploitable 2 and 3 and some other vulnerable VMs off of Vulnhub. And also to add to building your own virtual images that are vulnerable is ExploitDB, the site that has all the exploits on it. You can download the vulnerable software. They got links on all those exploits so you can test those out, because even experienced pen testers need a lab to test proof of concept. So you can download that vulnerable software and set it up at home. And that goes back to learning how to build to learn how to break into it. So, if you build something that requires Apache Tomcat that's vulnerable, you download that software and install it. So you're getting the skills with that there too.
Right. Yeah. There was several that there's Overthewire, which is a great one. If you don't know Linux, let's say you're just, breaking, like y'all had said, breaking into security, their Bandit CTF that they do, basically you go to overthewire.org, I think. Yes. Let me see.
And we actually had it listed in the book too.
Oh, that one's in the book? Okay. Again, like I said, I only had a couple hours.
And Under the Wire should be listed in there too.
Under the Wire, yes, that's the PowerShell one. That one's actually surprisingly difficult for me, but I have less experience with PowerShell than anything else. Juice Box, OWASP actually has a number of vulnerable types of systems. Juice Box being a vulnerable web application. Vulnhub is always fun. PicoCTF, Hacked-Box, of course. I think that was mentioned in the book, but. Docker, they have vulnerable Docker images that you can use too, which expands your capacity for that. So, and if you're a blue teamer doing this stuff already and you want to move to pen testing, you're probably using a lot of these tools already, like Nmap and Burp, and because Burp is de rigueur for us at Leviathan there, because we do a lot of web app pen testing. So Burp is usually our tool du jour with all of its plugins and what have you. I'm assuming one or two people out there still use Zap, but Burp is the word. So, let's see what else. We got about 20 minutes left. So, gaining experience. Some of the items you mentioned in gaining experience was doing bug bounties. Now, for some companies, that's a little controversial. How does somebody who is doing bug bounties explain that to their boss? It's like, hey, I'm hacking these companies for money. I'm doing this on the side. I know a lot of pen testing organizations kind of frown upon people doing those while they're working at the pen testing company. So, what do you tell people that are doing bug bounties in regards to gaining experience? How do you leverage that or show that is directly applicable to a pen testing experience?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we do suggest that getting into bug bounty programs is a great way to start off learning application pen testing. Mm-hmm. But we present that advice with the assumption that you are not employed by a company as a pen tester yet. You are trying to develop some experience that you can show later on when you're looking for your first proper pen testing job. So if you are not employed by a company as a pen tester and you use your own home computer on your own home LAN or WLAN, to try and hunt for bugs in specific applications, then that should be legally and policy-wise just fine.
Okay. Philip, same question.
Yeah, pretty much the recommendation there is to get into pen testing. Although some, once people get their foot in the door, they really, unless they're really good at bug bounty or just like the challenge, they usually don't stick with it. Although I know some people that work for pretty well-known consulting companies that their company lets them still do bug bounties. But the main thing there is for someone trying to get into the field, and also someone getting in. If you get into like Bug Crowd, for instance, they have their next gen pen test. So people that get in there doing bug bounties, once you start scoring well on and finding bugs, you get invited to do the pen tests. So you're actually getting to do actual pen test along with bug bounty. And then some of your companies like Synac that are crowdsourced pen testing that, once you get the experience, you can move over to those companies and you can show real world pen testing experience. And even like Cobalt, their pen test as a service. So it's like crowdsourced pen testing there as well too. Most people have to start out with like HackerOne or BugCrowd because you just sign up and anyone is allowed to do bug bounties once you get that experience and start getting to do the pen test within those organizations or move on to one of the other companies that do more specific pen testing. But I think as long as they're going through a program, I know some people might be concerned your testing websites are worried about them not having authorization or they're going out finding bugs and reporting it to companies. I think as long as you're going through a bug bounty program, even if it's like one that Google hosts or Facebook, as long as you're going through the proper channels, I don't really say there's a problem. Now, someone that's going out finding bugs and trying to turn them in to make money, I think that's kind of a little sketchy there because are you doing it legitimately? You found this bug, you're trying to get paid. So I think it's the intent there. So I think even someone before you get into pen testing, make sure you're going through programs so you stay legit because that can look kind of questionable. And I'm sure there's some cases that people were doing, sketchy things and they found a bug and decided to turn in and make money. So that's.
Hey, big corporate bank, I found a vulnerability that affects all of your ATMs. Why are you arresting me?
Yep. So how does somebody who has, I don't do bug bounties, so and it obviously will show here in a second. How do you translate that when you're looking for work? Because this is the gaining employment stuff. How would I put that on a resume to show value to the potential employer? I'm not just somebody who knows how to run Nmap or throw brute force attack using SQL map. How do I write that up in such a way to make myself valuable to the pen testing firm? I'll start with Philip because I did Kim last.
Yeah, so you're gonna write your resume. You're gonna put some of the tools you have experience with, and you're gonna put on there your experience, whatever bug bounty platforms you're working on, and then share any kind of bugs that of course not revealing customer information, but tell the type of bugs that you found, describe the tools that you use to find those bugs. So a lot of it's going to really boil down to once you get your foot in the door to do the interview, what you've learned from bug bounty, because bug bounty is web app pen testing. The only difference is you only get paid for the bugs you find. And kind of interesting, I recently switched jobs, and during my job search, I was interviewing with a boutique pen testing firm, and they told me how it's a lot easier for them to find web app pen testers because of bug bounty, because people are getting experience that way. Right. Network pen test is kind of hard to get experience that way without, because, some bug bounty companies may have it, or more of your pen test as a service companies have those sort of things. So it's a little more easier to get that experience.
Okay. Kim, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned HackerOne. The big tech companies that regularly host bug bounty programs like Microsoft, Apple, even Tesla for their cars and whatnot, they do have very specific rules and guidelines.
Okay.
So as long as you are following their specific rules to a T, there's no risk in any negative consequences. The worst case scenario is you spend a couple of years looking for bugs in an application and you don't find anything.
Okay.
So
do the hacker bug bounty groups, like the Synax and the Hackeronies and those, do they have a reputation score or anything that would be like a brag score or something you could use?
Yes. Yeah, they've
Okay.
got rankings on there, and you can see how they rank, and even on those they rank how well you do. So if you're doing like charity bug bounties, your points add up. So it's not all based on, they'll have listed rankings on there. So it's kind of a way for a lot of people on those platforms, and that's another way too that people can show how well they do in certain scenarios, because like even like your hack the box, you can show your ranking there, because a lot of employers also will look at CTFs like National Cyber League and see how people score there and try to recruit from there, because they do see there's some potential. Some of it may not be a direct, reflection of pen testing, but some skills there they see that people can learn. But yeah, like your different bug bounty platforms, they have a ranking system.
We mentioned CTFs as another
Right.
way that you can gain experience before you get employed as a pen tester for the first time. And there are CTF, like capture the flag competitions everywhere.
Yep.
Every big security event seems to host some sort of capture the flag event. Hackerspaces do. And the nice thing is, like bug bounty programs, you can just join in. You don't need to like be hired by anyone or recruited by anyone. You can sign up for a capture the flag, and you go into their virtualized network or server or whatever, and you try to find that flag in an application, in a script, in a text file, knock yourself out. And that is useful experience for being a pen tester.
Yep.
Definitely. That looks good on a resume.
Cool. Yeah. Some of the job descriptions I've been writing is, do you not have formal pen test experience, but you have a black badge from DEF CON for winning the CTF, you probably should talk to us. That kind of stuff. Those kinds of events definitely help you get up get into where you would like to be. So we're talking about gaining employment, but so one of the other things I wanted to ask about was, let's say you're a company and you're like, oh, there's a talent shortage, as the media has been wont to tell us is the case for the last 5 years. I would argue that it's caused because companies don't know how to hire people.
Exactly.
Which leads me to my next question, and I'll start with Kim on this. What can companies do to be better at hiring people who are not formal, and I'm using quotey fingers, pen testers, and need pen testers?
We mention the mythical cybersecurity skills gap in the book directly. And it's even, if you look in the glossary, it's even defined in the glossary. So I wrote that part and in the glossary, which is, it's this perception in the industry that there aren't enough people with specific cybersecurity skills that these companies need to hire to keep their systems secure. But that is an imagined gap. One of the big problems is trends in the industry that, like our friend Alyssa Miller has pointed out, for instance, entry-level position must have CISSP.
Right.
Which is absolutely bloody ridiculous, because you need 5 years industry experience to even qualify for the certification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a definite prerequisite. And it's very expensive exam to write. So that's absolutely ridiculous. It's like wanting a PhD to get a job, flipping burgers.
Right. Right.
Another problem I think is sometimes companies want to find an excuse for why they need to hire someone offshore for much cheaper than they can hire domestically. So if they have an excuse where they say, oh, we couldn't find any qualified candidates in our country, so we have to hire someone for this job for $2 an hour. That we frequently see that kind of stuff too. I forget what the specific regulations are, but that kind of stuff really makes me angry. We in the book, Phil and I, we strongly recommend that if you can get the certain certifications that we mentioned in the book, you should pursue that because that'll give you an advantage. But in an ideal world, those certifications wouldn't be necessary, that you could go to the employer and you can just show them what you know and what you can do, and that should be sufficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Phil, anything to add there?
Yeah, this is kind of a very close topic to me because teaching and mentoring, I have a lot of students that get out and try to get their foot in the door. But one of the things I can say is if you're trying to break into the industry and you have no security experience, one of the advantages of going to college is internships. And what I've seen is people have internships. You've got a lot better chance of getting a permanent job that way because companies are willing to give you a break, realizing you don't have the professional experience. That being said, what I really like to see, and I saw an article recently on LinkedIn, I really like to see companies start doing kind of apprenticeship programs. Bring someone in like an internship, let them work 90 days. And if they're learning and they'll make a good employee, then hire them on permanent. Otherwise, you're not risking much for 90 days. If they don't work out, you don't keep them. But then you're also taking a workforce, bringing people in. This person has 90 days experience. They're going to have an easier time finding employment somewhere else because now they've got experience. So that's what I really, really would like to see is more apprenticeship programs. Let someone come in for 90 days, let them work and see how well they pick it up. I mean, just from an internship perspective, we had someone in my previous job on the AppSec team. She knocked it out of the park. She came in and she had been teaching herself Python. She wrote a script that was able to go through and find WordPress or what WordPress version was running all these sites because there was a vulnerability at the time. This is something she came up with. This wasn't something she was guided on. So a lot of times just giving people a chance to see what they can do. People that don't have their traditional college education, if you did like the apprenticeships, maybe they're learning to code in Python or Golang or something, or they're doing a lot of CTFs, hack the box stuff. Maybe they've got skills. They just need to be given a chance. Sometimes it's not the finer points, having the experience, but sometimes when you bring someone with a lot of experience, it's hard to break those bad habits. So there's kind of an advantage to bringing people in fresh. You're able to teach them how to write reports the right way, and instead of trying to break some of the habits maybe they picked up somewhere else.
I think related to that, another big problem with the industry, which causes this mythical skills gap, is that, I hate to say it, but a lot of companies are reluctant to spend money and time on training people. That's why they want a unicorn. They want someone day one who has all of the very niche specific skills that they want. And you're not going to, if you have like a whole bunch of niche skills that you demand a specific job applicant has, you're probably not going to find anyone. As we said, you're looking for a unicorn.
Sure.
So if companies need to spend money and time and take the risk and train people, use their own resources to train people. But a lot of them don't want to do that. And I think a lot of them are also afraid that if we train someone up for this very technically advanced position, they're just going to go on to another company and take that training with them for higher pay.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. And, working at a consultancy, we have junior positions, and we do have, we don't call them junior, we call them associate. We have associate positions for folks that are getting into InfoSec and being pen testers. But we do require some knowledge of security. I mean, it can't just be, I was a dog walker yesterday and now I'm a pen tester. Because there is a perceived, we're paying you X number of dollars, plus we're going to have to pay, X number of dollars in operational costs just trying to get you spun up on how to do X, Y, and Z. And, we're pretty much going to have to write off the first 3 to 6 months, depending on how quickly you catch on. And it's hard to codify, I'm able to do things and learn things quickly, when you're interviewing. So, I would love to see more junior type positions, and not just in consultancies, but, in organizations that have red teams or, large SOC implementations or something, so we can train those folks up. So we have about 5 minutes left. Y'all wanted to talk about something called hacking is not a crime. Maybe Kim, you could start us off on telling us what hacking is not a crime is?
Hacking is not a crime is an organization started by our friend Byron. I think
Okay.
he was exasperated at entities like the mainstream media, for instance, talking about cyber attack stories and saying, so a hacker was distributing ransomware. And so in a layperson's mind, a hacker is someone with a hoodie and perhaps a Guy Fawkes mask, like Anonymous, and they're cyber attacking by typing at 400 words per minute, which is how you hack into something. Mm-hmm. I'm being facetious. But so he was very angry about, because that misconception is harmful. Sure. Because hacker culture is absolutely integral to the development of the technology that we use now.
Right.
And Phil invited me to be an advocate for the organization, and I was really honored because I feel really passionately about this. My whole career, I've been adamant about not using hacker as a bad word.
Okay, very cool. Phil, what's your thoughts on hacking is not a crime?
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting because when Brian started out, Chloe Mustagi is also a co-founder now. They joined forces. Chloe was doing a lot of hacker rights related stuff, and so they've kind of joined forces. So Brian was really his focus was getting, he printed a bunch of stickers out before like DEF CON 2018 and was giving all these hacking is not a crime stickers out just to kind of bring awareness. His was like more awareness, but a lot of what Chloe was doing was more working with governments, trying to get wording changed, working with media, trying to get them to use other terms, because, whenever you're trying to use, even using pen testers or security researchers, it kind of instills fear into people and they're scared to work with them, thinking everyone has bad intent that knows how to hack. So a lot of that's just to try to improve the whole meaning of the name, take back the name and distinguish. Because you look at locksmith, for instance, there's some people use lock picking for bad, but then it's used for good. So it's kind of a good way to compare the two.
Awesome. Okay. I do see the stigma. Even, people started using security researcher, and then that kind of ended up with a negative connotation because of whatever reason. It was either the media is helping to propagate that as also a bad term. We've had several people on this year that we've interviewed, the JSOF folks who were working on the Ripple 20 stuff. They're security researchers. They're doing good things because what they were investigating was something a customer asked them to investigate. And they were treated with utter suspicion when they first disclosed their vulnerabilities to the company in question. And it's interesting to see the fear there from a company, from somebody who's literally trying to help you get better or improve, whether you like it or not, I guess. So that's cool. So are they doing anything? I know there's some videos online here at hackingisnotacrime.org. They're also a nonprofit, which is great. They're doing awareness and advocacy. Looks like they've got, B-Sides, is that coming up? B-Sides DFW? It's coming up 7 November, so it's in 4 days. Damn. Okay. Well, sorry. Podcast came out on the 14th. Yep. Apologies. Hopefully you got to go to B-Sides DFW, but they did a thing there at B-Sides DFW.
And several of us are involved there because Chloe is hosting a CTF through our employer. We work for Point 3, and so she'd be hosting a CTF, and I'm also teaching a workshop there on network pen testing. So that's kind of how the environment there, as well as Hacking's Not a Crime. We'll have a virtual booth up in the Discord.
Okay. All right. So one last question before we go. The Pentester Blueprint, was there anything that you've you've got this, big, nice document, you sent it off to the publisher, and then it's like, crap, we should have added that to the book. What was something that you forgot to add to the book that you're going to put in version 2? Kim, please go.
Actually, something very similar did happen in the making of this book. I finished up a preliminary draft after like working with everything that Phil has written. And then I was making the finishing touches, and then we had a draft to submit to the publisher. And then it got to the typesetting phase of the publishing process. And then Phil contacted me and he said, hey, I wanted to tell my story about how I became a pen tester. And I said, Phil, you should definitely put that in the book. This book is your baby. I was so happy to co-write the book. But ultimately, Phil is the genesis of this book. Phil, now I'm thinking about Phil Collins. So the book was already being typeset when when I got into working on the book, we changed the voice of the book from first person perspective to first person plural perspective, which meant changing every instance of I to we and every instance of me to us, because it's kind of complicated co-writing a book like that. But one thing that I added to the book was a whole bunch of interviews with people in the industry. And that was page set as like a box separate from the main text, so the reader knows these words are a part of this interview. And I said, Phil has to write the story about how his career came to be in first person singular voice. He has to talk about I, me. So I said, this should be typeset like the interviews, like in a shaded box, so that the reader doesn't get confused with the main narrative of the book, which is in first person plural. And I'm so glad that we did that Phil got to tell his story at the beginning of the book, because that is a part of the soul of the document. It adds something that absolutely has to be there.
Cool. Okay.
So you are actually, when you look at the book, that's probably version 1.2 of the book.
Right on. Okay. Phil, was there anything that you're like, oh yeah, version 2, is going to have this, or what do you think you might add in the next version? I know the first version technically hasn't shipped, but
Well, next version, I could see. I think overall most of it was where it needs to be, but I could see the next version being breaking down different types of offensive security and showing the skills associated with that. So break down the courses specific to those and more map that out. But one of the biggest things I learned from this, I'm 55 years old, and I finally learned that it's okay to ask for help, and collaboration is a good thing. Because one of the things, my writing is pretty brief, short, and to the point, and I just really wasn't getting there with the book. I still needed more content to get close to the 200-page mark, and I was really trying to think who to ask. And I'd actually reached out to Kim before in the past about writing advice and what writing platform, Peerlist or Medium, or to write on, and just asked her some writing questions in the past. And it's kind of dumb of me, because I was sitting there trying to think of people that I could help. I thought, I need to get someone to help me finish writing the book, because I'm either going to go the self-publish route, or I'm not going to write the book at all. And I had a contract with Wylie Publishing to write the book, and I'd already announced that, and I didn't really want to not reach my goal.
Right.
So I kind of reached out to another person, and I don't know why it escaped me for Kim after I sent a message to the other person. I thought, oh yeah, Kim is not only a writer, she has worked as a technician, and she has a lot of experience and a big following and well respected in the community. So it was a no-brainer then. So it was really great. It's turned out even better than I expected, because she's made the book a lot better than what I envisioned. She brought a lot to it with the security specific stuff outside of the pen testing. And she had a lot from the pen testing and her idea of getting quotes from people. I mean, we've got, like Rachel Toback is someone that commented in the book, and PicoCTF, there's even a quote by him in there. Marcus Carey does the forward to the book. So there's a lot of the community that breathes in that book, and community is important to us. So that makes it even more special.
Fantastic. Okay. So the Dead Tree actually the ebook is out now, and we're recording this on the 3rd of November, but it is out now on, I have it on Google Books, which is something I'd never used before. I told Phil and Kim beforehand, I was like, oh, this is a nice interface, and it looks nice, and it's got like side-by-side pages, and I love that. It's on Google Books. It's also on Amazon as well. Are you going to do an audiobook of this?
We've been asked, I had someone ask me, I would love an audiobook. Now, I don't like making promises that I can't keep. I don't even know if Wylie does audiobooks. But if there's any potential for Wylie to do an audiobook, if they see that the sales of the book are really strong, we can suggest that to our publisher, see if it's an option. Cool. I think it's a good idea to have an audiobook, quite honestly, because there are blind people, for instance, who might benefit from an audiobook. Some people can see perfectly fine, but they retain information better by hearing it than looking at it.
Right. And you could do kind of like how Malcolm Gladwell did with Talking with Strangers. You could take those interviews that you had with the folks in the book and actually maybe get them to come back on and record audio for the audiobook. Something like that, It's
a great idea.
So there's a Kindle book on Amazon if you want that. The paperback comes out on 24 November, which is hopefully before this podcast. The podcast will be out in time for that. Kim, Philip, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate you taking the time. And how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to talk about the book? Maybe they've got ideas, or maybe they would like some advice from y'all about how to become a pen tester. Kim.
Oh yeah, Twitter. If someone tweets at me, as long as I'm not sleeping or in the shower, they will get a response probably within 30 seconds. I live on Twitter. So it's at KIM_CRAWLEY.
Okay, excellent. Phil, how about yourself?
Same for me. Twitter is Philip with 2 L's, last name WYLIE.
Okay, excellent. All right. Any other last thoughts before we go?
Well,
it don't matter.
One of the things I'd like to share, and there's so many people that are new that are wanting to get into, they want to do pen testing and security, and I don't want to ever discourage anyone from their goals, but there's a lot of other cool things you can do out there in security. I mean, threat hunting, digital forensics, and incident response. So you don't have to do that first. You can try other things. If you need to get your foot in the door, being in IT is going to make it easier to become a pen tester than trying to come in without that experience. So get the experience however you can just to get in the door, then it's easier to get a pen testing job. And like I said, there's other things that are a lot of fun. So research everything out there, find something you like, because if you find something you're passionate about, it's not like a job.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. Well, thank you both for being on the show, and hope everybody has a great week. And thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was part 1 of our show with Christopher Hadnagy this week. We'll be back with part 2 of our interview with him in a couple weeks. So before I go, just want to mention you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow Mr. Betcher at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. You can follow Ms. Berlin at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. You can follow me. I'm Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. And our official podcast Twitter is at Brakesec, BRAKESEC. I'd like to thank our patrons. Donations that they give us every month go for hardware upgrades, hosting of the podcast on Libsyn, and our Zoom web conference accounts, among other things. And if you're interested in getting a t-shirt or whatever, you can feel free to hit up our TPub store. which is found at the shortened link, which will take you directly to TPub, is https://brakesec.com/store. And please feel free to check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Please leave feedback when you can. It gives us more visibility and allows people to find us more easily. All the other places where you can find us, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and those other places, Spotify, for instance, you can find them on our website at breakingsecurity.com. We'll be back next week with another episode of Breaking Down Security. Have a great week. Please be nice to one another, and we will talk to you again soon.